Tel Aviv, right now. The third wave has arrived. Iran is striking Tel Aviv again. The videos flooding social media right now are not just one or two isolated clips. We are talking about dozens of pieces of footage from different neighborhoods, from different angles, all documenting the same brutal truth. Explosions, fires, and a city absorbing punishment for the third time in less than 24 hours. It isn't just about scale, it's about what it reveals regarding the trajectory of this war. Because, folks, the Patriot batteries are not holding, and the Iron Dome is not holding. Two of the most expensive, battle-tested, and politically significant air defense systems ever deployed in a single theater are being penetrated simultaneously again by a country that pre-conflict assessments described as militarily degraded. After the first wave, American and Israeli commanders conducted an emergency recalibration. Battery positions were adjusted. Radar parameters were updated based on flight profiles observed in the first engagement. Additional interceptor stocks were brought forward. The operational assumption going into the second wave was that the lessons of the first wave had been absorbed and the defense architecture was better positioned to respond. The second wave proved that assumption wrong. After the second wave, the same process happened again. More adjustments, more recalibration, and more confidence expressed through official channels that systems were adapting to the threat. But now, the third wave is proving that assumption wrong too. The question that nobody in Washington or Tel Aviv has a comfortable answer to right now is, at what point does recalibration stop working? At what point does the pattern of failure-adjustment failure tell us something fundamental about the capability gap between the Fattah missile and the existing defense architecture? That point, folks, may be right now, the consequences of this third wave, because it carries implications that extend far beyond Israel's borders. We need to speak directly about the Patriot system, because its failure tonight over the skies of Tel Aviv is sending horrific shockwaves to every capital in the world. Understand this. The Patriot is not just a missile battery. It is the cornerstone, the bedrock of the United States air defense partnerships with dozens of nations. From Europe to the Gulf to the Pacific, every government that has spent billions to purchase the Patriot, every ally that has built its defense doctrine around American-supplied technology, is holding its breath tonight, running its own calculations. Those calculations are not comfortable. The PAC-3 variant, the most advanced Patriot version currently in service, was specifically designed to defeat ballistic missile threats. Its performance record in the Gulf against Houthi missile attacks on Saudi Arabia and the UAE has been used consistently by defense officials and American contractors as ironclad evidence of operational effectiveness. And folks, that record was real. Against the threats it was designed to defeat, the PAC-3 performed. But here is the billion-dollar but Iran's Fattah missile is not the kind of threat the Patriot was designed to defeat. The third wave is exposing that gap with brutal finality to every military planner, every procurement official, and every government ally watching this conflict in real time. The Patriot was built to engage missiles following predictable parabolic arcs, targets that fire control radars can calculate precisely from hundreds of kilometers away. But when faced with a maneuvering hypersonic warhead capable of abrupt course changes at 13 times the speed of sound, the Patriot becomes instantly obsolete. If the Patriot cannot protect Tel Aviv, one of the most densely defended and prioritized areas in the world, how can it protect cities in Eastern Europe or bases in the Pacific? Tonight, the military prestige of the United States is burning along with the Patriot fragments falling onto the streets of Tel Aviv. This failure will create a shockwave in the U.S. Congress. It will trigger investigations and political attacks from the opposition. American defense contractors now face a public relations nightmare as their flagship product is humbled 3 consecutive times by an adversary they once deemed backward. Iron Dome was never designed to stop hypersonic ballistic missiles. Its design parameters from the beginning were for short-range rockets, artillery shells, and improvised missiles, the threats from Hamas and Hezbollah that the Israeli public has faced for 2 decades. Iron Dome's interception rates against those specific threats have been genuinely impressive, and no one disputes that. But folks, Those very successes of the past created a doctrinal and psychological overconfidence. The third wave is settling this with brutal finality. Did Israel's investment of billions into a system that works extraordinarily well against slow, predictable projectiles inadvertently create a false sense of security about the broader defense architecture's capabilities? Yes. When faced with the Fattah, an object moving at hypersonic speeds with maneuvering capabilities, the Iron Dome system is simply blind. It is optimized to protect neighborhoods from low-altitude rocket rain, not to engage a hypersonic monster screaming down from the upper atmosphere at Mach 13. The third wave has exposed the reality that Israel prepared too well for yesterday's war while leaving the skies open to tomorrow's technology. The shields once praised as impenetrable are now rendered helpless against a type of firepower that strategic planners fatally underestimated. Forget the complex military jargon for a minute and look at this number 3 in its purest form. In the world of war planners, the first wave could be a lucky strike. The second wave could be the final gasp of an exhausted adversary, desperately emptying their remaining stock to create a dramatic show. But folks, the third wave? The third wave tells a completely different story. It's no longer about technology. It's about strategic depth and the ability to sustain a long-term campaign that Washington was never psychologically prepared to face. The assumption of Western intelligence for decades has been that Iran's missile capability was a finite resource, something that would evaporate quickly under the weight of precision strikes from the U.S. and Israel. We believe that by hitting logistic jugulars, Tehran's arsenal would run dry. But the third wave striking Tel Aviv tonight has shredded that hypothesis. It declares to the world, the Fattah missile capability is not a capital for display. It is a continuous flow. This is where the mathematics of this war become brutal for us. If Iran can launch a third wave with a scale equal to or greater than the first two, there is no logical reason for us to believe they don't have a fourth, fifth, or sixth. Iranian military planners didn't build this system for a single assassination. They built it to sustain a prolonged bombardment campaign. They have preserved, hidden, and dispersed Fattah launchers so deeply that our initial airstrikes have only scratched the outer shell. And here's the true game changer. This sustainability robs Washington and Tel Aviv of their most important weapon, certainty. When you cannot determine the adversary's stopping point, every decision to escalate becomes a leap into the dark. Should we continue striking Iranian territory knowing that each blow could trigger a new hypersonic wave into allied cities? The third wave has transformed a precise military surgery into a war of attrition where the side with the cheaper, deeper magazine is controlling the tempo. Tehran has proven they don't just have teeth, they have a lung strong enough to fan this flame indefinitely. Washington thought they were controlling the clock, but tonight, Iran showed they are the ones holding the pendulum. Look at what is happening inside the bomb shelters of Tel Aviv tonight, because this is where the war is truly being decided not by missiles, but by public trust. The third wave has pushed Israeli society into a completely new psychological state, one that no democratic government can sustain indefinitely. If the first wave brought shock and the second wave brought fear mixed with determination, then the third wave is bringing a brutal question. What is the actual plan? In a nation where security is identity, allowing the largest metropolitan center to be struck 3 consecutive times by hypersonic technology is a prestige disaster. The Israeli public is starting to demand more than just promises of hitting targets in Iran. They want to know why the billion-dollar defense systems they have trusted for decades are letting hypersonic streaks pierce the night sky, night after night. The lack of a satisfactory answer from the military and political establishment is creating a toxic political environment in the heart of a nation under fire. This pressure is forcing Israeli leaders to make extreme choices. When people see that the shield has failed, they will demand a sharper sword. The Israeli government is stuck between continuing military escalation to appease angry voters or admitting a bitter truth. They cannot absolutely protect the skies against Tehran's technology. The third wave has turned every bomb shelter into a political forum where patience is draining with every explosion. Washington may look at strategic maps, but Tel Aviv is looking at the exhausted faces of its own people, And that is the kind of pressure that can collapse any perfect operational plan. Look at the nature of this crisis. Because what we are witnessing tonight is not just a technical failure, it is the total bankruptcy of a theory of victory. The United States and Israel entered this conflict with a core assumption: strike hard, strike fast, and degrade Iran's military capability below the threshold of effective retaliation. They believed that by destroying nuclear facilities, command centers, and missile infrastructure, they would achieve strategic objectives before the cost of the operation exceeded the political will to sustain it. 3 consecutive waves of Fattah missiles striking Tel Aviv are evidence that the degradation of Iran's retaliatory capability did not occur at the rate or depth that the theory of victory required. Either the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian missile infrastructure were far less effective than assessed, or the Fattah inventory was larger and more dispersed than intelligence could imagine. Or, folks, it's both. And here is the key point. Any of those conclusions requires a total strategic reassessment, not just a minor tactical adjustment, because if Iran retains the capability to continue striking Tel Aviv indefinitely, then the original theory of victory is no longer viable in its original form. We cannot talk about regime change or denuclearization when the major cities of our closest ally are burning for the 3rd time in less than a day. Tonight, U.S. and Israeli commanders are working in real time to find something to replace the plan that vanished into thin air over the skies of Tel Aviv. Look at the naked reality unfolding in the sky tonight, because Iran's 3rd wave is not just a military event. It is a statement about the limits of air power against a determined adversary with a hardened retaliatory capability. Washington and Tel Aviv now stand before 3 paths, and none of them are easy. The first path is continued escalation. This means dramatically intensifying airstrikes on Iranian territory to finally locate and destroy the remaining Fattah batteries. But the risk here is extreme. It could trigger a total war expanding beyond control, where every city in the region becomes a target. The second path is a negotiated pause through back-channel communications. This requires both sides to step back from their ambitious public commitments, a feat that is politically excruciating for both the U.S. administration and Israel, while the wounds in Tel Aviv are still bleeding. And the third path, folks, is a bitter admission that no one wants to say out loud, that the original objectives of the operation need to be recalibrated against the actual cost and duration required to achieve them. The third wave has written a message in fire across the night sky, that the era where a superpower could impose its will solely through precision airstrikes has come to an end. Every government watching tonight is reading that message. This is the collapse of an illusion. Washington thought they could control the tempo, but Iran has proven that in a world of hypersonic missiles and strategic resilience, the shield can be breached and the sword can be blunted by the will of an adversary that refuses to fall. The question is no longer who will fire the last shot, but who will be sane enough to find the exit before the entire region is consumed in the next hypersonic waves.